Advent always brings with it quite a few apocalyptic readings because it's as much about waiting for the birth of Christ as it is waiting for the ultimate coming of Christ. And today's reading from the Gospel of Mark fits that sort of description squarely. Mark is urging everyone to stay very alert and to keep awake and to keep on watch. And I don't know about you, but staying constantly alert and keeping on watch is like a lot of cortisol and a lot of stress and feels a little bit, unattainable. And so I was processing what I thought about that, if that even mattered, what I thought about it, and what might be a more life-giving way to think about wakefulness. And it sprang into my brain that reminded me, at least, of some theology of a famous guy named Meister Eckhart. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, brain, cool. And I thought, oh, what would be more interesting is if Eckhart actually had other things to say about the season of Advent. And sure enough, he did. So, if you've read the e-news, you already know that this Advent season, we're going to sort of take the different pieces of Eckhart's theology and use them to kind of elucidate the scripture passages. I think it will be insightful. I think it might be fun. So anyway, you can tell me then at the end of it if it was neither elucidating nor fun. But we'll try it on for size. Since this is the first Sunday in Advent, a quick excursus on Eckhart, who lived in the late 1200s into the early 1300s in Germany. And he worked for the church and did a lot of administrative stuff, spent a lot of time traveling. He was also an incredible teacher of theology. People flocked to hear him speak because he had this kind of coherence and depth of thinking and used rich images that people were not used to hearing. It captured their imagination. He was also charged with sort of keeping track of and helping the spiritual life of a series of abbeys full of nuns. And so he was preaching all the time. And he developed this great following because people found him to be both brilliant and accessible. An incredibly deep thinker who was very spiritual. And so he ends up with the title Meister. It's not his first name. It's the word that means master. And so Meister Eckhart comes down to us today. And he's, I think, an extremely relevant person to consider these days. Partly because though his theology is really rich, it also spoke to the ordinary person. Because he had the belief that really God was present in kind of the ordinariness of our existence. That God was present in all things. Now, don't think that this is a pantheism. He didn't believe like God was the rock. And it's not like panentheism. He didn't believe that God was present in and through the trees or whatever. He believed solidly that God was in all things because of Jesus Christ being in all people. Eckhart famously wrote, humans can become, by God's adoption, what the Son of God is naturally. Now, the Son of God, being Jesus Christ, naturally, according to Christians, is both fully human and fully God. And what Eckhart says is, and because of Jesus, when humans are adopted by God, we too are not only fully human, but will become fully divine. That there is a holiness in every single one of us. Eckhart believed that in the deepest space of who we are, the truest center of our souls, that was the place God already was. And so everything in life is holy because the people who walk through that life are deep down holy. And part of the task then of life is to cultivate an awareness of that. So that in this life, we become aware of our deep, central oneness with God. And Eckhart says, and that's the ticket to joy. That's the ticket to a joyful life. And Eckhart said it's important as you walk through life to just remember God in all that you do. And you might expect that coming to kind of a oneness of God in your soul would mean that Eckhart thought you had to go join a monastery or go like hibernate in the woods in some hut for years on end, but he didn't. He said, stop trying to make God come to you, stop trying to earn God's affection, and realize that holiness is in you, and you find it by living the life that's yours. And he said, instead of thinking so much about whether you're doing enough good things, think about how you want to be and remember Jesus Christ in all that you do. And so whether you're folding the laundry or you're picking up your kid or you're watching your grandkids or you're driving to work or you're defending a court case or you're teaching in the classroom, the holiness of God is present to you in that. And Eckhart would say, God is found in all those things. You just have to become conscious of it. You just have to cultivate an awareness of remembering God in all that you do all the time. And he says that's prayer. That's actually what prayer is. And people thought then, and maybe some people think now, you got to come into a place to pray, or you got to be in perfect solitude. And he said, no. If you're working in the fields, that's prayer. If you're a merchant and you're selling items and you're doing that's prayer. Everything that we do with our fullest extent is praying. The question is whether we're remembering God in all of it, coming to conscious awareness that God can be in all those things. And if we're aware of it, God can surprise us in the most pedestrian of moments. I think the word that describes this best for me, and it's not Eckhart's word, is receptivity. That God is always, says Eckhart, coming to us again and again and again. It's just a matter of how open we are to receiving the gift of God's presence, which is really freeing because it means like, oh, you can't miss it. And if you did, it's going to come again. It's about cultivating an open-heartedness that is willing to look around and realize God could be present at any moment. What could I receive from God? I think the image that comes most to me is the image at the Eucharist, right? Which we'll celebrate later, where we come with our hands, out to receive the bread. They're empty, right? And we come week after week to receive the grace God says is present to us. And some weeks, we feel it. We're so conscious of it. And other weeks, maybe not so much. But there's a diligence in it. There's a discipline in it. In the weekly coming and putting out the hands to receive what God offers, and it changes us over time. And maybe that's just the posture that life is best lived in. That we're not always conscious of where God is. But if we're open-hearted and we've steadily got our hands out to receive whatever God offers, over time, we're more conscious of where God is. Over time, we're more receptive to how God is present to us in all the places we absolutely never expected to find God. The ordinary things, sometimes the crummy things, sometimes the heartbreaking things, of course the beautiful things. And I wonder if that's not what Mark might mean by staying awake. That wakefulness is about awareness of God, being ready to just receive the gift of God's presence in our life, and to spend our lives trying to remember God in all the little things that we do. Not doing something special or constructed, just living the life that's ours and knowing God is every minute a part of it, because God is every minute a part of us. So, I've lost it in this vestment. It's a little large. This guy Mark Burroughs and this guy John Sweeney took the sermons of Eckhart, which they're medieval sermons, so they're even more hard to follow than like the ones people give today. And they condensed them into poems. And so I want to share one. Where are you? If I want to find God, I must give up thinking I know where God is or how I should find God, and give myself to all the things in my life where God always already is. And if I have God in this way, I'll find God in everything and miss God in nothing. for God is in everything and misses nothing. And when I find God in this way, everything becomes God for me.